mini kind of oral recitation. Like we could go through these and talk about like how the image like represents and like symbolizes the thing. I also thought about doing with animations too potentially, but that's beyond the scope of right now. Were you able to hear me, Harold?
I'm back. You're clear now, so I think it may have just been me. Um, let's see. Do a check 1 2 for me.
Check 1 2 3 4 5 6
It's good.
7
It's good. It's
ish.
good. It's good. It's good.
All right.
I think I got the gist of what you were saying too. Like a session not unlike this, right, where we have as many people as we can, and just go over how and why. I guess in some ways, in terms of the imagery that's there so far, it's meant obviously, especially as a draft, right, to and can still be added to before it goes through active issues or anything, of course. But it just wanted something to get our teeth into, because I know I spoke to it a couple times, and I don't know, I know that it's quite abstract to try to even talk about. So yeah, and it's kind of needed. Like there's no, even if I did write something about the images, which I did there a little bit, right? Uh, it's not like talking about it. We kind of have to talk. Whether it's a wampum or any type of symbolism, it doesn't really have any meaning until you talk about it. So it only has meaning amongst the collectives, and so yeah, 100%. But yeah, it's something too that can get facilitated by the active issues as well. It's not um, it's not in stone there either, right? Before it gets there either. So yeah,
Also, where did the images come from?
I made them those images.
Oh, wicked, dude!
Yeah, 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 yeah. I made them. I couldn't get it out of my head that one day, and that's usually when it starts to come out. Um, the day I think after we discussed it a little bit and discussed where the old code of conduct comes in, which this section is called additions to the CLC because we already have a CLC, right? But I noticed there's only parts of the CLC that have a whole lot of substance to them, and even the substance that they do have to them, it wouldn't be enough to um, uh, facilitate what would justify our own, Web3 stacks ecosystem focused recital or oral protocols, right? So yeah, yeah, that yeah.
It looks great.
Like it,
This
man.
is
So are these gonna be used for NFT, like for attending stuff?
I think it can, right? I think it, you know, the for the native context, right, which is always my guide rail. Um, it's not. It's far from a proof of attendance protocol type of thing. Although there is some overlap in the sense that you don't really have a good. Uh, you don't really know what a 201 pump belt is until you experience a council that's telling you about it, right? You experience a law recital that's telling you about it, and so in that sense, um, there's like this subjective or individual ownership, right? You can say, right, but it's mostly like this collective uh, ownership, right? And so uh, having the non-transferable thing that Haas is thinking about, I think, kind of fits within that realm, but it can also it can be something we use for alignment, right? Uh, for example, understanding one of the concepts that's associated with our symbolism that's attached to these oral protocols can be referenced to in discussion, right, as opposed to opinion, right? These concepts that kind of go beyond just personal opinion can be spoken to, right? And they start off right with a lot of them being directly in relation to these indigenous protocols, so that leading us back through references all the way through there that come up in consensus, and yeah, it's I think it can be a dope thing, and of course these things are not. Like I said already, they should be added to, if possible, by more artistic folks than myself. More concepts maybe come out of the oral recitation altogether, or through the active issues process, like other important um, uh, you know uh, it, I think I think it makes sense though that like what's shown there, like some of these concepts come right from Hero, or come right from Merrick, or right from Juliet, right? And so Haas, right? Myself. So these are folks that have been active in these discussions, and you know, it feels like it makes sense to pull oral protocol from what have been oral protocols up until this point, um, uh, as opposed to written. So, and from folks that have been, thinking seriously about some of these concepts over and over and over again in these sessions. And for some of us, also in that indigenous context. So yeah, Merrick, please, if there's if anything that sparks right in terms of important concepts that are in this Web3 context, that you remember bringing up yourself, or you remember other folks bringing up quite often, and resonating or lingering, it'll likely make up a good concept that we can attach some symbolism to, that we can be sure not to forget as we make decisions, or use these as points of reference in our decision making. But it's yeah, it'll be interesting to see just how fleshed out it gets, and whatnot, or like what's enough, when's too much, that type of thing. That's starting to cross my mind now. But yeah, forget your original question now. Maybe.
That was I'm not sure exactly what my but that was beautiful nonetheless. I'm like looking through them now, and I think, but yeah, actually, I'll just ask you like straight up. What does like the infinity represent? And is it consistent kind of across these different drawings? Because I see that same infinity. I'm like, is that? I'm looking at what? Yeah, you tell me.
Yeah.
Just, infinity stone.
Yeah. It's just regeneration, right? Regenerative abundance. Yeah. Regenerative power. Design. Mm-hmm.
That sounds like Infinity Stone.
I guess so, yeah.
You know the ones in Avengers, right?
Vaguely, yeah. Just through pop culture reference. It's
Yeah.
nothing beyond that surface. I never watched the movies or nothing either. But yeah.
But yeah, because I'm looking at these infinities, and what my brain's doing is it's like tying them all together in like this greater 3D space, and it's like I'm seeing that same kind of regeneration, like Mobius strip, kind of, like inside of this vortex. Anyway, like there's like a 3D structure to it, and that infinity kind of ties all these concepts together. As I'm looking at them. Anyway, that's not a direct feedback. That's just a thing I'm thinking.
Hell yeah. No, it sounds like fractals, man. Yeah, I mean, and these two are in general, I think just the general aesthetic of it are very much inspired by the Vevey or the Insibidi that I'm always referencing in the through the historical references of the Haitian or Haitian Revolution, these Vodun um, uh, symbolisms that come out of they have some African um, uh, lineage, but most of it, maybe upwards of 80% or more, have Native American lineage, and it was like this coming together of these two uh, um, toolings, right, for organization. Uh, the African one very much steeped in slave trade resistance, even back on the continent, very much steeped in matrilineal traditions, female societies, like this uh, last line of defense type of thing. Uh, to be able to organize in between plantations and things like this as well. So a lot of those stuff started to come together with Native American symbolisms that were important to cosmologies, important for organization as well. When they came together in those precarious circumstances of the transatlantic slave trade and the invasion of the hemisphere by the settler colonists, and um, and so uh, a lot of those symbolism are kind of etched in my head for some odd reason, and so that aesthetic is very much um, inspired by that, right? You'll see similar things representing the coming together of people. It's not exactly the same, but some of the plumage lines on the ends of what might otherwise look like arrows, the slight curvature of it, almost like the like plumage, is another common theme throughout some of the Vevey. Um, uh, and the Insibidi, if I'm not mistaken, but especially the Vevey. I think it's another uh, um, ode to regeneration or abundance or uh, engendering innovation or creation, right? Um, so that's something that came to mind when thinking of some of that stuff. But yeah, I mean, we can go through each one too, and I was kind of some of this stuff started to take me aback because, for example, the very first one uh, was literally me just trying to visualize the concepts that I think about when thinking of institutional theory, or and thinking of regenerative commons, and uh, you think of the restrictive uh, 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 characteristics of institutional structures, right? What they can do to a community like ours, for example, right? If you put us in very rigid institutional structures, all of a sudden, and our meetings are ran that much differently, and our system design was that much different. It would restrict a whole lot of each of our own intrinsic uh, motivations, expressions, restrict our capacity to find our voice or express our voice, ecosystems to have autonomy, express their voices, so on and so forth, right? Innovation to be decoupled from top-down control and have an uptick in its rate, right? Because of this decoupling of power, this distribution of power. This um, this is all to me, right? You can think of uh, a core or the center of a circle, and lines, having the potential to emanate but being stifled. Why? Because there are rules being defined by somewhere outside of the system, outside of that collective. So these are lines coming in, right? And coming in hard and aggressively and from all angles, and restricting, right, completely, right? And this is the whole thing that Dada folks are trying to get across when trying to communicate what happens when extrinsic motivations come into systems that where there is only intrinsic motivations. Very quickly, the intrinsic disappears, and so in that imagery, you can see that side that represents institutions. There's nothing coming out of the center, right? There's no infinity. There's no regeneration. There's no, and there's nothingness. Right? There's nothing emanating because you have all of this coming from all angles. Restricting this, and it even starts to take what took me back was the shape that it took on. It took on this very spiky almost, or harmful looking, or destructive looking shape or feel. It definitely doesn't feel like the harmonious shape on the left side. That's speaking to this regenerative collective abundance, right? Being able to freely emanate outward, right? And so, yeah, after that was the first one that I attempted, and so I was like, oh shit, maybe there's something to this, and I started to like it a little bit. But this stuff is also very important to me personally, I think, because of some of that history that I always reference, and some of the global impact and precedent that it set, right, in motion for us to even be having this conversation. But so it very much feels like a continuation of what was important for folks to be able to organize on their own terms, particularly with a matrilineal native voice, right, in mind. And yeah, yeah. So yeah, I'm excited to share this with you guys and go through the ones that you guys need going through.
Dude, oh my, this this is I'm blown away, man. Like, also having you explain it, and I'm looking at this like first drawing now, like I didn't fully realize that those arrows, that the second that the drawing on the right was like arrows that were flipped around, like that didn't click for me until you explained it. And now that I see that and I understand, and like hearing you, just honestly just like listening to your voice and hearing you speak through what went into your thinking, it just brings this to life for me, and also places it in connection to the other things that we've talked about. And I just would like to review that it's a beautiful experience.
I'm excited. I'm just as excited to share it with you. Trust.
Yeah, this is, oh man. Yeah, I want to keep going and do more. I don't know, Hero, do you have things to share too? Like, also, I like animated it in my head to where like those arrows on the left are expanding, and then when you draw a circle around them, like you were talking about, now they can't expand, so it has to reflect back. But when it reflects back, it like fractals in, and that's when they like come around and they end up like looking on the right. There's like an animated version of it in my head. Again, just the thing that I'm thinking. But anyway, yeah, check.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when I first look at it, when I first saw it, I was like, what's this? But now, like, you explained it a little bit. So, yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, surprisingly, it makes sense to me now. So, yeah, I didn't know Harold's that creative. But yeah, I appreciate the explanation.
Trust. No, trust. I'm not that creative, and no, I didn't know I was even that creative either. But yeah, I mean, I guess it's a lot of these, like these things. I think I'm pretty frequently talking about like some of these historical precedents that we don't always get exposed to. They're a big part of why we're having this conversation, and it's I guess that when they compound it, you can actually build stuff with it, and I guess that's what's been happening this entire time, right? I've actually I've actually been very vocal throughout most of my life about the lack of creativity, right? Especially growing up with a whole lot of musicians, old school musicians, just emanating this creativity, and yeah, like next to that, I've always felt very small almost in terms of creativity. So over from 2016 onward, right? Like Um, I'm, there's a lot of ideas going through my head, and it felt creative for the first time, and being able to like do something with those ideas felt creative, and but all that still don't feel artistic or conventionally creative in the sense. The digital fabrication stuff gets me a little bit more excited, to get creative, but I haven't got able to get into that as much as I'd like. But yeah, so I guess doing these diagrams or doing this now is maybe up to date one of the most creative things I've ever done. So
Yeah, I think like I believe personally that everybody is creative. Some people just are creative. Their outlet of being creative is like through cooking. Cooking can be a very creative process, making a cake or cooking a dish, like you inventing a dish. Um, and that person might not be very artistically creative or creative in coming up with some ideas for some stuff in the job or something like that. But it doesn't mean that person is not creative. So the way I see things is that everybody has their creative, their way of, everybody's creative, but it's like finding um, that natural talent somewhere in one area of your life somewhere.
finding their voice, maybe. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, yeah, there it is.
Well,
It's like when the title of the movie gets said in the movie. Um, yeah, yeah. Um, no, but yeah. Do you have any hidden? Are you like um, a master karaoke singer or something, hero? Something we don't know about?
no, no, no. I do enjoy it sometimes, just a bit of singing. But
Hey,
uh, no, in terms of creative, I think, yeah, I think maybe like ideas of solving problems. I don't know, really.
I'd say that SIP application is pretty creative. I was saying,
Is it?
uh, yeah, or the residency application for the SIP residency, right? I was saying to Haas, like, you have to be fairly active. You realize after attempting a couple of those applications myself over the years now, you realize you're pulling from places where you've already been fairly active, and active in a new space, right? For everybody, it's a new space for everybody, pretty much, and it's a fairly creative endeavor, I would think, right? Pulling from real time experiences almost simultaneously to be able to pull off one of those residency applications. So, no, yeah, I see what you mean in terms of all the different shapes and forms that creativity can take. Maybe there's something. It seems like something important not to lose there. No, uh, it feels like it speaks to horizontality a lot, or um, uh, a shifting of lenses to be able to take inventory where folks may not know there's inventory to take, right? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, let's go through these. I guess if you guys are down, or we can do it async. It's up to how you guys are feeling. I hope you guys are doing well.
Yeah, no, let's
Um,
utilize the time now to go through them. Yeah, why not? Happy to.
Beautiful. Yeah. And then maybe we can filter it through other folks. Once we have a good firm understanding of the concepts, right? We can always ping each other for to help explain some of these things too. I guess as they're going through active issues and stuff like this. But I guess this could be a critical time to get a good foundation for us. Um, but yeah, let me see. And you guys feel free to add on to some of the conceptual jargon as well, right? Or how the symbolism may relate to it, how it could relate better, all of this. Because it's essentially also, I guess, a little rehearsal for what oral recital looks like, right? This collective input on both the design of what's going on here, but also the concepts that are built into the designs of the symbolism. So the next one is regenerative open source commons design, and remember the sequencing for these first two. The sequencing for these first two really comes from, and the first one I guess is trying to speak to inner abundance and external disturbance symbolism. So that important concept that I think comes with intrinsic over extrinsic incentives design, right? So make sure to get that in there. But the second one, and remember these first four or so are pulled right from the truth, peace, power, and righteousness concepts from the Longhouse, which are also attached to their four sacred ceremonies in their cosmology. You can find Turtle, Wolf, and Bear in there as well. And so I felt like it was a safe place to, like, as a foundation for us to start on inside of a Web3 focused context for any our oral constitution or oral code of conduct protocols. And so somebody trying to talk?
Sorry, Harold, where am I supposed to be looking at on the page?
I'm looking at the second image now. So it's regenerative open source commons design, the image 2. So it's a circle with an image from the first image inside of the circle.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
And so that same image inside of the circle is pretty much this epitome of regenerative commons, right? Of course, it's speaking to intrinsic over extrinsic in the first image, but the intrinsic is a commons made up of intrinsic motivations and structures that come from, consensus, and things like this, for commons and things like this. So, the lines in a circular shape, kind of coming together, are what you can see in some of the symbolism in that insipidity that I referenced, right? It might just be a circle and lines almost looking like a wheel, and it would represent people coming together in Congress, right? Again, like important symbolism that we could take for granted now, right? But when you're trying to, stay out of sight in between slave plantations, it's important symbolism, right, to be able to have amongst yourself. And it's important symbolism in our context too, right? Because it refocuses us to commons, right? Which is extremely important part, right? The truth part, right, is kind of the intrinsic piece referenced in the first image. Also, takes us back, as long as we're involved to the native dialogue. It's important intrinsic motivation of ours. It's built into Advocates design. But it also points to, in the native context, it would point to their cosmology, right? And this also points us back to that cosmology in that sense. But it also is just speaking to the individual scale, and intrinsic family motivations or intrinsic local regional motivation, these type of things, right? And in this second image, I just added the circle, right, to emphasize commons, and emphasize this regenerative abundance within commons. And I figured it's an important concept for us. We understand what it does for paradigm shifts because of the corn, right, of the regenerative commons of the three sisters in the native context. This corn is important for peace because autonomous access to commons, regenerative commons, shifts you away from self-preservation. It shifts you away from hyper-competition, hyper-individualism, right? And it shifts the collective towards mutual aid or mutual support, right? And the rationale behind self-preservation starts to disappear. and this is extremely important for peace, right? Even when you're thinking about diplomacy between nations, right? Not having or the lack of autonomy um, in access to any given resource um, is a lot less diplomatic than when that autonomy can be felt and tangible. And the authenticity in the diplomacy is that much more effective. Not just, I think effective diplomacy in conventional sense has a choppy meaning, but in this sense, I mean effective in terms of the long-term sustainability of everybody involved, right? And not the contrary. And so, uh, yeah, I think this is the gist of this image and some of the importance that we can speak to in oral recital. And of course, things can be added to the discussion the same way that it can be added to from you guys right now. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know that I have things to add, but I'm listening and very much appreciating. So thank you.
No, that's a part of the what we've seen from our protocols too, right? Just the nodding along. But yeah, if anything does come to mind, please bring it up because we can all learn something potentially. Hero, if there's anything that that you guys want to add to imagery wise, something that color or anything like this that comes to mind is all on the table.
I don't have much comment really. As in, like, I don't know what to add. I can see how it relates to what you're saying when you explain it to me, so it all makes sense. So that's what I can say, I guess.
Good, good. No, no, I'm happy. I'm happy, especially if it makes sense. But
I
yeah,
mean,
especially
without
to
explanation, I would struggle.
good, good.
Or maybe if there were some added text beneath of some bullet points, I think I that would help. But
Right. But even with
but
that,
having the person explain to me like is the best, right?
yeah, yeah, it's the only way. It's the only way, especially
Yeah. Oh, okay.
when
Yeah.
it comes to symbolism. When you think about it, when it comes to symbolism, like there's really no, especially when it comes to symbolism that's supposed to be attached to, fairly deep concepts, right? Uh, the yeah, I mean these first four are all you know all attached to indigenous cosmology. So there's infinite ways to speak on this, right? Especially at the beginning here, but I think all the way through as well. Um, I think I may have related all of them to. It's hard for me to not relate much to the stuff that we learn from the Longhouse these days. Um, but yeah, I'll continue then. Thank you kindly for the feedback, you guys. I'll continue to the third one here, which is yes, yes.
Wait. I I want to just sorry, I'm reiterating and seeing if I should ask something, but I'm just gonna. I guess I'll say no. Like I just got to number 4, and I'm like, oh, it's the Gayandawana, and I'm seeing the balance, and I'm like, okay, yeah, right, okay, that's the 4 sacred ceremonies that are like tying into the truth, peace, power, righteousness, and okay, I feel like I want to talk more about it, but also we can keep going. I don't have a like solid on question, but I'm like trying to make it fit the cosmology direct to the like image as well as what we have mapped. to like the open source kind of type of language. It's like it fits in the three like dialects, and yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, no, I'm glad. It's coming clear to you. It's exciting in that way, man. So it's good to see that you're seeing it, and it'd be important too to, for folks like yourself that have both sides, right? That to be able to even see that that's there, right, is important, and important to communicate to other folks, right, through these active issues. To have somebody other than myself to be able to speak to those things, would be nice, right? I know you may be someone who's not only heard the Longhouse speak to some of these things quite often, but also myself, you've heard me speak to these things quite often. So I know you have a good grasp of it. Yeah. Let me see. Yeah. I'm on the third one, the matrilineal heritage and power, right? And so this is the power in that truth, peace, and power that you will hear the Longhouse reference, and the power is a reference to the matrilineal protocols, right, and decision making structures. So not unlike what we're trying to achieve with our consensus flow protocols, and not keeping folks apart, right, in terms of decision making, but definitely making sure that we're doing due diligence and making sure folks have autonomy, right? Even some of that autonomy and accessibility to commons that we're referencing is not necessarily possible as soon as it's not possible anywhere. And so if it's not possible for women just simply because we are used to systems that haven't thought about it, and it's not possible for ecosystems because we're used to systems that haven't thought about how to build it in, then it's all of our autonomy and accessibility and voice that's at stake, that's at risk of deteriorating. Maybe not right now, maybe not tomorrow or anywhere in the near future, but in the long term, it damn sure won't be there, right? And so this is the importance, I think, of this matrilineal heritage and power that's trying to be depicted here. At the end of councils, you hear Edith say, "Wagatsununi," and this is a reference to "We Are Happy," but it's we should also say "Erisawit, Erisawit, Erisawit" 3 times, referencing all 3 levels of existence, creation, and particularly the 3 levels that are referenced in the Honigori Gadekwa, at the star level or galaxy level, sky woman level, or at the moon level or solar system level, and at the planetary scale, right? And so that's really what's being referenced there, right? Is this overall design that we're able to tap into once we do our due diligence in terms of autonomy with respect to understanding of this matrilineal heritage. So, it's interesting, right? Because it's also there's a reference to consensus in here, right? We know it's not just unchecked power, right? It's consensus-based power. There's references to autonomy and accessibility. There's references to so-called women's rights, so-called ecological rights. But there's also reference to distributed power. So in this sequencing of truth, peace, power, and righteousness, each part of the sequence is dependent on each other. And it's interesting that peace comes before the power, but it's also interesting how power comes after the peace. And the next one is, as Merrick says, balance, right? The righteousness or the sustainability, right? The capacity to sustain everything else that came before it in the sequence. And we've spoken to this concept as well. I'll wait to get into it, but all of these things are things that we've spoken to in these sessions, and a big part of how we try to communicate our system design and our commons-based systems design. But yeah, again, open-ended to add to the imagery or symbolism to communicate some of these things. But yeah, there's accessibility mapping and stuff like that later on as well. So just a note. But yeah, hopefully that one made sense. Because the other ones hopefully made sense as well. But understand if it's just another nod. Maybe I'll try to be a little bit quicker with these. I don't know. Interrupt me as well if you want. The so the we one of the things that we've been talking about, especially more recently, with some of the scaling up discussions and outward facing content discussions, and organizing, coordinating that's going on, is how to make the most use out of this, what's before these images, right? With that intrinsic and motivation stuff, trying to hold integrity to the core values of a given of our community, right? Things that we hear Hero speaking to quite often when he's discussing mapping, and things that we hear discussed when he's trying to achieve, not letting newcomers become stragglers, but also not allowing core community members to become stragglers, and that also lends itself to core values of a given ecosystem, right? Being able to be a little not as solid as we'd want them to be, right? We would hate to see the ecosystem all of a sudden, or not all of a sudden, but in the long term, be synonymous with proprietary software, right? Or synonymous with not so privacy friendly approaches, or synonymous with even a lack of innovation, right? Because these are all things that we wouldn't say for the ecosystem now, all things that keep us in the ecosystem now. And so this is, a part of the integrity keeping that's necessary, while also allowing for diverse voices to come in and contribute just as easily as core contributors contribute. So you don't have a stagnation in growth or accessibility to the ecosystem. And so, to me, that it's a tightrope to walk, right? In terms of trying to maximize growth, also maximizing integrity amidst that growth. And it's sometimes a steep learning curve. Folks coming from a world of proprietary, or coming from a world of even conventional corporate structures when it comes to what we're trying to achieve with advocates we're even a learning curve within their learning curve, as we started to say amongst ourselves. So this is what this image may be failing to communicate, right? Just with some sheer aesthetics or visuals of something that maybe allows you to achieve that balancing, right? So no matter how big the numbers get on one side, if you have sustainability, seriously thought about and built into your system, that regenerative sign again on the other side, you can keep stacking, right? And you should be okay. I think one thing that what people don't think about in this kind of maybe more fitting for a real or recital, but the opposite as well, right? Being able to shrink and maintain balance, maintain integrity, maintain impact, maintain potential, right? I think is just as valuable, right? It speaks just as much to sustainability, and also speaks to why it's important to think about fractals when thinking about growth. When if we're thinking about commons in one part of the system, we maybe should probably emphasize commons just as much at the edges of a given system, right? And so And if you don't, right, it's no longer a fractal with maybe as much fractal dimension, if you will. So it's not as fractal as it could be. And because of that, it's the scalability, right, is hindered. The integrity is hindered, right? This it's the structural integrity, or in this case, the philosophical or the ethos of the ecosystem can drastically change. But it, when it shrinks, right, but it still has holds its potential, or I think that speaks to um, the structural capacity to shrink and hold that potential and integrity, speaking to like that fractal structure. But that speaks to resilience, right? I think that's a positive too. But then, speaking about growth, which I think this image more so is, um, that fractal infrastructure, that fractal architecture is important um, uh, to ensure that as much growth can happen as possible without compromising the integrity. So that's maybe one of the images I have the least amount of confidence in. So I'm open to what you guys think about this one, uh, and any other ways about depicting it. But yeah, let me know.
Yeah, I know. Like I see what you're saying because you tied so much into that, and when I look at it, I see like law recital or oral protocol. You can see that act, but there's so much more tied into it. Like what you're talking about with the like learning curves and just staying up to date, and so yeah, I don't know how to do it, but I see what you're saying. It definitely represents oral constitution and oral protocol, though, at least. But there is so much more that I don't know how to do it, but it could be done. I see.
No, there's actually there's a little recursivity there in what you're saying. I didn't even make that connection, but yeah, of course the oral protocols are that these are actually trying to spark off are extremely important for maintaining that integrity while growing, right? And we know this because this this is part of the precedence that the Longhouse shows us, right? The every 5 years for over 2,000 years, this is how entire nations can stay in a continuity of mind, right, or balance, right, a balanced mind, a balanced collective mind. It's an interesting connection, right? Continuity of mind goes right alongside Gondwana, a balance. Uh, it's a balance in the collective's mind, um, which is important for long-term sustainability. Right? And I guess it sounds uh, a little bit oversimplified than it is when you say it out loud. I don't know, but yeah, interrupt it anytime if you need to, Hero. But I'll try to be a little bit quicker through these and not miss too much. I don't want to do a whole oral recital for you guys, but yeah. So this image, you see a repeat of one of the images before and a new image. That triangle is my attempt at recreating a play symbol. There was more of a play button there at first, but I thought it looked too out of place. So I did my own rendition, and there's that same old infinity regenerative symbolism in a circle. But I think the most important piece of the symbol. Yep, can you hear me?
Oh, you're on that one. Sorry. Okay. Sorry. I found the one with the play button now. My bad.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It may not look like a play button, but yeah, yeah, yeah. It's my attempt at it, and it's an attempt at trying to speak to regenerative play. Some language that in addition to sandboxing, it comes from some of the dialogue with Juliet and some of the language from that I've learned from the generative justice research group, right? Speaking to some of the benefits of play, but in this sense, right? Uh, it's another means of speaking to institutional theory, right? Where uh, that circle, right, represents protection in this sense, right? It's a collective is always right, the circle, but also protection. In addition to those arrows in the center of the image is like bridge work on our own terms, right? To institutions, right? And that's really the definition exstitutional theory, right? How do you preserve community values with bridge work on your own terms to institutions, legal framework wise or structurally, right? To find that in between space in international domestic law, right? So this is Primavera de Filippi's theory out of Harvard Law, right? And thinking about blockchain-based systems, thinking about DAO like structures and the importance of code of conducts, right? To DAO-like structures and how you can leverage this illegal space to preserve community value. So this is speaking to specifically that legal context, right? So this is why I think there's a lot of repeat of some of the concepts, but I think one of the most important parts of this is that bridge work, right? So the center of this, the arrows going from that direction to that direction on our own terms, right? So yeah, I don't know how you guys feel about that one, but it's my attempt at trying to communicate some of these things about exstitutional theory, which I think is become a lot more prevalent in our discussions in recent months. It goes right along with other research that is so heavily influenced by Primavera de Filippi, right? This, but yeah.
Yeah, that helps. Your explanation, helps see this one a lot better. It's kind of similar to that first one in that here's something better than the extrinsic incentives being kind of the same thing as that restrictive institutional structure, and it's kind of cool. And then the other thing is, this is just gonna be a brain thing, but whenever they're talking about bridge work, particularly in this indigenous context, I'm always thinking of the Mercier Bridge, between Ganawage and Montreal. Montreal being the seat of industry, the New York of Canada.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That bridge work was on their terms, and so it had the transformative effect in the opposite way, right? Because all that transformative potential gets flipped. But if that bridge was built on, to a wampum terms, right, then it would have had the transformative effect on the industry, a transformative effect on the institutions potentially. But definitely, allows for the transformative potential to stay autonomous on that native side. So that's an interesting way to zoom out. Yeah.
And then, one more layer, and this gets kind of deep, but talking about that when they were building that bridge, right? And it collapsed, right? And to do that is a story that's told in Canadian engineering institutions, because all Canadian engineers, professional engineers, it's like a protected class, and they get this iron ring, and they wear it on the pinky of their working hand, and the story behind that iron ring comes out of that bridge collapsing, this Quebec bridge between it's called the Mercier now, but it's called the Quebec Bridge when they first built it. The first one that collapsed, and it was the story that we're told in engineering is it was a simple calculus error, and it was an honest mistake. When in fact, and this is only after Longhouse dialogue that this became revealed to me, was that it was known already that these plans were prone to collapse. They'd collapsed before in other places, and it was done. Again, and this is a bridge being built on the terms of directive industry, right? So the engineers, despite knowing that it would be a collapsed design, went ahead with the design, and then they had the bunch of. This is recently after Britain had won the war against France in that area. So Quebec had recently been colonized, and it was Kaniagahaga it was Mohawks from Ganawage and Frenchmen that were working on the bridge when these British engineers, these British Royal Engineers, had the bridge be collapsed, so there's this different story, and there's a lot of, man, I've just been thinking about, as things that came up for me as I was like learning to be an engineer in Canada. There's a lot of things that have been inverted and lied about. And it's just tied into the symbolism of the ring for me. And actually a lot of, how just, for instance, a corporation captures, highly intelligent, creative people in these roles where they're going to be stuck in a structure where they, even if they wanted to, wouldn't have the choice to, be better to the environment or the world around them. It keeps people locked into these status quo structures, and it's kind of captured by this ring, at least symbolically for me in my mind. And that ties in back to this bridge, and then this literal, the Quebec bridge, that bridges, this native world in Ganawage over to the, non-native and, status quo economic structures in Montreal. Anyway, that was a thing in my brain. Check.
No, yeah, thank you. It makes me want to just emphasize the bridge a little bit more in the imagery. I don't know if it's just simply adding some color or, doing something a little bit more elaborate with the line art other than just some dashed lines and arrows. Because it is, I think, what should be the emphasis, or it's one of the things that should be emphasized inside of executional theory for sure. As it's emerging as a theory, really, from Primavera. So yeah, I'll try to move through this. Thank you kindly, Merrick. So this is trying to speak to symbolism itself, the very thing that this is attempting to be. So a little bit more recursivity there. But yeah, again, circles for a collective. I changed the color of what's in the middle to kind of symbolize the symbolism, if you will. And the lines, again, I told you, almost like this wheel-like image that is used to represent Congress and some of that insipidity symbolism. So here it is again, but this time in reference to the reciprocal dialogue that happens in a collective setting with symbolism as a guide, right? So the very thing that this symbolism will be used for. So that's what that's trying to communicate. Hopefully it's simple enough. And with a little bit extra time on this one, we could emphasize, what exactly goes on in the oral recitation, right? So I wouldn't stop here, like if we were really doing it, we would, whoever is speaking,